Well, welcome to the Maple Conference 2021. I'm Rob Corliss. It's my pleasure to start us off. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. So in your event guide, you will see the Territorial Acknowledgement written there, and I'll read a bit of it. It says, Maple's headquarters is located in Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. We acknowledge that Waterloo region, including the 3 cities and 4 townships, is located on the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. There's more there, and it's important, and I'll let you read that, but I wanted to add something from the land acknowledgement at Western, which is not too far away from Waterloo. This was told to me by Danica Stonefish, a young woman, a student at Western, who gave the land acknowledgement at a conference I attended a little while ago. She pointed out that this land around here was not just used for living, but also for trade, and not just trade of goods, but also exchange of knowledge. So there's actually a tradition in this area of people coming together and exchanging ideas and exchanging technologies and exchanging ways of living. And this is actually an important thing to acknowledge, that these things happened before. So I'll let you read the rest of the acknowledgement on your own. But right now, I'm going to turn the microphone over to my friend and colleague, Jürgen Gerhardt, who will introduce our first speaker. Jürgen.
Thank you, Rob. It's my great pleasure to introduce the first keynote speaker of this year's Maple Conference, Dr. Veselin Jungic. He's a teaching professor at the Department of Mathematics at Simon Fraser University in British Columbia. He holds many awards, very prestigious awards, the Pouliot Award and the Teaching Award of the Canadian Mathematical Society, and the very, very prestigious 3M National Teaching Fellowship. He's also, as of this year, just a month or 2 ago, he has been appointed Fellow of the Canadian Mathematical Society. He's very active and very passionate about mathematics education and about outreach, and he is actively promoting math to elementary and high school students and also among Indigenous Canadians, and that's what his talk is going to be about today. On top of that, he is also, like my previous speaker, Rob, and the other co-chair of this conference, Paulina, and myself, a senior editor of the new journal, Maple Transactions. And last not least, he's a really, really, really nice person. So please, Veso, take it away.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words, Jürgen. So so no pressure, yeah? let me share my screen okay, everything looks right, Jürgen?
Yes.
Okay, so good morning, everyone. I'm giving this presentation from my office at Simon Fraser University, and Simon Fraser University is located on the traditional territory of Coast Salish peoples. And most what I'm going to talk about is really what I learned from my friends and collaborators from the members of various Coast Salish nations. But let me say a few words about myself. So my name is Veselin Jungic, and you pronounce this Jungic as a German Jung with the Slavic H. And I'm a teaching professor here at Simon Fraser, and I've been teaching mathematics since 1978. Long time, thousands of students. I started teaching at Simon Fraser University in 2001. In the first part of my career, I was teaching mathematics at a small university in northwest part of Bosnia and Herzegovina, former Yugoslavia, my home country. Both of my parents were teachers. My father, Mirko, was a math and physics teacher, and my mom was an elementary, kindergarten to grade 2 teacher. And when I was a high school student, I was good almost in everything. So my dad was telling me, be an engineer. But at that time, all engineering drawing was done by hand. And that was never my strong side. My mom would say, be a physician. But I still cannot stand there just looking at blood. So I said, Mom, Dad, I love you, but I'll study mathematics. And I did my undergraduate degree in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Mathematics always came easy, kind of easy for me. So this was not a difficult decision for me. But I wonder, what would I ask my younger self now? Or what kind of answer I would get if I ask my younger self, what is mathematics? Well, 40 years ago or more, I would say, well, that's non-Euclidean geometries, Galois theory, functional analysis, philosophy of mathematics, logic. But it turned out that searching for an answer to the question, what is mathematics, has been a humbling experience. And that search included thousands of students that I interacted with. And in the view of many of them, mathematics was something different than what mathematics has been throughout my life. Working with very young people, introducing mathematics and mathematical ideas to very young people, that is another eye-opening, or it was another eye-opening experience for me. When you face this true curiosity about mathematical ideas at this level, and particularly through my collaboration with my friend and mentor, Betty Wilson O'Shea. Betty is a member of the Haida Nation, and we've been collaborating about 10 years now through the Math Culture Outreach Program. And if I have a true mentor in my life, except my parents, that would be Elder O'Shea. So let me start with a couple of examples to motivate what I'm going to talk about this. First, I would like to talk about an object created by Haida people. And Haida Gwaii is an archipelago of the coast of northern British Columbia. It's been inhabited for about 8,000 years, about 8,000 years. And Haida culture has been one of the richest culture. There is a Canadian poet that claims that Haida mythology is one of the richest in the world. The object that I want to talk about is this hat. And it is kept, or the photo actually of it is kept at the SFU Museum of Archaeology. It is made, it is estimated that the hat was made in 1900, around 1900. And here is the description, how it was made and what it meant. But it is showing actually that the hat had its spiritual side, and also that it was a part of society, of showing some societal relationship in the Haida. But for mathematician, you know, some of the various symmetries are clearly visible. And if you look at this hat, you know, mathematician would describe the shape of this hat as truncated hyperboloid of one sheet. And this is what I want to connect here. So this is obviously an object that we attribute to traditional knowledge of Haida people. But what is traditional knowledge? This is a commonly accepted definition of traditional knowledge, and you can find it at World Intellectual Property Organization documents. And it is defined as oops, just a sec. Oh. As the knowledge, know-how, skills, and practices that are developed, sustained, and passed on from generation to generation within a community, often forming part of its cultural and spiritual identity. Now I want to show you another example with a video that O'Shell made for me earlier this year. So,
O'Shell, my traditional name is O'Shell, which belongs to my judgment, my great-grandmother from Pomaka, from Ubiratan. I'll make several bases. These are slats with the inner from the cedar tree, and that's a beginning one, and I usually bind off. And as I'm constantly thinking about.
Oh. Oh. Oh, I'm sorry about this, but from some reason let me try again.
O'Shell, my traditional name is O'Shell, which belongs to my judgment, my great-grandmother from Pomaka, from Ubiratan. I'll make several bases. These are slats with the inner from the cedar tree, and that's a beginning one, and I usually bind off. And as I'm constantly thinking about what do I want to make and what is the size of my slats as they go up, because that's going to determine what kind of design I put in. This one has a very narrow slat base, so my design will be narrower, and it depends on the height of the basket, how large I'm going to make it. And I'm also thinking about what's the purpose of this basket? What am I going, or whoever I give it to, what are they going to be using it for? So this one with design, these slats are fairly narrow, and I probably want it to go up 4 or 5 inches high, so that will require several of these slats to go around. And so that will also determine what kind of design I want to do. This is a coil-based basket as opposed to the slats. And I was just experimenting because I was teaching a beginner's class, and I thought, well, I'll have them do a very basic design, which should be fairly easy. But we found that it's not as easy as we look. It depends on the dimension of your base, and as you move up, the size of your slats will determine what the size of the wild cherry bark will be. So this infinite design in the end has to be made so that it looks infinite. It just keeps going. So how do you do that? It gets tricky. So then I started experimenting with the butterfly design, because a lot of people like the butterfly, and I decided that I would do it in 2 pretty close to the same size, and the third one was a bit bigger in how it changes. And there you can see the black is the wild cherry bark that's been dyed, and the regular color of the cherry bark and the wings and all of that. So it also determines on the size, how many butterflies are you going to put in this size of a basket. So I don't want to overwhelm. So imot, ixnams, chachazach.
So here are some of the words that Rochelle used in her presentation in this little video. So my question is, does Rochelle do mathematics? And is the Haida hat a mathematical object? So let me go back and see how one of the ways how to define mathematical knowledge. Bishop in 1988, he had actually several quite influential articles about mathematical knowledge. And this is what he said. There are, from my analysis, 6 fundamental activities which I argue are both universal and that they appear to be carried out by every cultural group ever studied, and also necessary and sufficient for the development of mathematical knowledge. And these are those 6 activities: counting, locating, measuring, designing, playing, and explaining. And if you go back to this video that Rochelle made for us, if she does all of these in this little clip, she meets all of these 6 categories that Bishop defined. For example, counting, the use of, in Bishop's words, the use of systematic way to compare in order discrete phenomena. And she's using 2, 3, several, many. Locating, exploring one spatial environment and conceptualizing and symbolizing the environment. Go up, go around, inner. Measuring, designing. And you also notice how, probably you noticed that Rochelle was using her hands for locating and measuring. So, if we follow Bishop's definition of mathematical knowledge, then this little clip, I think, demonstrates that part of Rochelle's traditional knowledge of traditional climbing basketry is mathematics. Next, I would like to introduce or to remind you about the term of ethnomathematics that was introduced by Ubiratan D'Ambrosio, a Brazilian mathematics educator and historian of mathematics that passed earlier in May this year, and who in the mid 80s introduced this term ethnomathematics, and there is a Canadian connection here. He published it for the Learning of Mathematics, Canadian-based educational journal. And this is how D'Ambrosio defines mathematics as a range of human activities that over the time were taken over by scholarly establishment, formalized and codified. And D'Ambrosio defines mathematics in 2 branches. That is academic mathematics. Maybe he oversimplifies by saying this is mathematics that we learn in school. And then ethnomathematics. And here the key word in this definition of ethnomathematics is that it is practiced among cultural groups. But already in this definition, D'Ambrosio includes professional classes into his definition as ethnomathematics as a mathematics that is practiced by cultural groups, children, and of course, national tribal groups. So another Brazilian mathematics educator about the same time, he elaborated more about this notion of ethnomathematics. And for him, mathematics knowledge is knowledge expressed in the language of given socio-cultural group. So again, it's a, you know, what I'm trying here to show, and I hope that I make that point clearer, that ethnomathematics is not only mathematics that we will see in traditional knowledge. It is rather mathematics that is practiced and referred to a cultural group. And he goes a little bit further, similar to Bishop. He defines mathematics as a set of activities, ciphering, measuring, classifying, ordering, inferring, and modeling. And this is something this is maybe what really kind of got me attached to this term ethnomathematics, is that ethnomathematics is also mathematics produced by professional mathematicians. If you look at a particular group as a cultural group, for example, this conference brings together a cultural group, a group that uses Maple in some way in Maple software in some way in their research. This group speaks the language that probably my friends from Ramsey theory wouldn't completely understand. It has a set of values that maybe people in think about mathematical education as a part of mathematics wouldn't use. So, and Borba visualizes ethnomathematics as a forest, And this idea inspired my student, Nicole Oishi, and myself to create this image. The forest of ethnomathematics, with trees of any size, of any shape, of any color. Forest of mathematics. Next, I would like to introduce to you or to remind you about this notion of two-eyed seeing. And this is something that, particularly in the academic community, is discussed quite a bit. It was introduced by Elder Albert Marshal of Mi'kmaq Nation. And he defined this as the two-eyed seeing refers to learning to see from one eye with the strength of indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and the other eye with the strength of Western knowledge and ways of knowing. And to use both eyes together for the benefit of all. So let me try to illustrate this idea of two-eyed seeing, going back to this Haida hat. So in the description of the Haida hat by Barbara Winters, the director of SFU Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology, she says that halfway down the brim, the maker changed the pattern. And really, if you look carefully, and if you use technology, you can really see that pattern. And you see this concentric diamond pattern there. And technology brings a way really to make this pattern visible to everyone's eye. And then I would like to show you a couple more that are done actually in Maple. like to thank Peter for helping me out and make this animation happen. Here is another example. The first example made this reflection symmetry, I think, obvious to any viewer. And here is another example. Oh, here it is. Oh, my videos are not collaborating. The drumming and singing is capturing Blackstock of the Haida Nation, one of my friends and collaborators. So, two-eyed seeing. This illustration is actually from the paper by Albert Marshal and his collaborators. That co-learning involves learning from each other, learning together, learning our commonalities and differences, and learning to see how to weave back and forth between our cultures, actions, values, and knowledges as circumstances require. Two-eyed seeing. And in that paper, there is also this illustration and the quote by another Mi'kmaq elder, Chief Charles Labrador, and showing these trees holding their hands. This inspired this illustration by myself and Nicole, and we extended our forest of ethnomathematics underground to show that all of those trees of ethnomathematics and mathematics are connected with the same root. Maybe for those of you familiar with the graph theory, you will probably notice that the underground is also a tree, a graph theoretical tree or bunch of graph theoretical trees. But this common root is what Jonathan Borman said: mathematics is human. It's our human experience with the world around us. It's our human curiosity, if you wish. It's our talent and our imagination. Mathematics is human. So this takes me back to Ambrosio's concept of ethnomathematics. So he gave these two models of ethnomathematics and mathematics in general. That mathematics is the way how an individual interacts with reality. And he calls us a ceaseless cycle. So at one level, it is individual. At the other level is the level of cultural group. But again, it is a way how the cultural group interacts with reality and solves the challenges and issues and problems that need mathematical thinking or mathematical concepts. So going back to a definition of traditional knowledge by the World Intellectual Property Organization, it is important to accept and understand that traditional knowledge is not something that just happened in the past. It is not just ancient, but it's vital, dynamic part of the contemporary lives of many communities today. And I'm going to try to illustrate that through a couple of examples. I should also warn you that understanding a cultural system by outsiders may easily go astray. Don't, and that is a challenge. That is a challenge for me as someone coming outside of the indigenous community, really, that I resist to say that I understand stuff. It's a learning experience. It's a really learning experience. Another warning is about mathematics and ethnomathematics. So Masha Asher said, as with any work in ethnomathematics, what I see, I can express it, and what I can express is confined to the ideas of some of my own. So there are two warnings here. One is, let us be very sensitive and careful when we are talking about traditional knowledge and culture, indigenous cultures. Let us not pretend that we can understand this completely. Let us keep our mind open that we are there to learn. But also with ethnomathematics, let us make sure that we don't see actually what we wish to see in a piece of ethnomathematics. So in the next several minutes, I want to kind of illustrate this fact, that the view of mathematics among indigenous people and traditional groups also evolves, also changes over the time. So here, I want to talk a little bit about the artist Dylan Thomas from this part of the world. And I want to talk about this amazing piece of art called Salmon's Spirits. So this is Dylan Thomas. He's an indigenous artist, and he lives in Victoria. He's a young man. And I wanna you to hear him himself.
Buddhist and Hindu religions have done these beautiful paintings. They're always geometric patterns, and they're supposed to aid in meditation. And they're always they always kind of use geometric kind of optical illusions and things like that to gain your focus. And what it's supposed to be is the entire cosmos from a human perspective. So I was on the internet one day and I came across all these beautiful mandalas, and right away I saw the similarities between some of the mandalas and some of the traditional spindle whorls, because Salish people did a lot of floral designs that were also using geometry to design them. And so this was my first kind of cross-cultural piece, and I really think that that's a cool way to go now, because like Randy was saying, the world's getting tiny now, so you can study all the other cultures, art forms, and kind of mesh them together now. And this is the first piece I've done, but it's definitely a direction I want to go in the future, and I've been taking a look at other, kind of branching off into all sorts of other arts and seeing how I could use that and mesh it with my traditional Salish work. Buddhist and Hindu.
So what Dylan Thomas is saying confirms this idea that traditional knowledge is not stuck in the past. So what he is doing in his art is combining traditional Salish practices with the ideas that he learns along his way. And he explains that one of his inspiration was Escher. He needed to learn traditional Salish art to feel confident enough to try to create something new, something that was inspired by Escher's art. And here is this piece, Sacred Cycle, and I want to show you here this threefold rotation symmetry that he's using in this piece, amazing piece of art. But his next piece is called Salmon Spirits. This quote is from an article that Dylan's co-authored in journal and published in Journal of Mathematics and the Art. And if you have a time, if you are curious, please read it. Please read it. It is really telling. It is probably in much better way explains this idea that I'm trying to communicate to you today. So this is this amazing piece inspired by Escher's work. And here is one piece that is that demonstrates fourfold rotation symmetry. But the whole piece also is made in fourfold rotation symmetry. Talk mathematics. So this is no doubt, this is a piece of traditional Salish art. Dylan Thomas is a Salish artist. But if you look inside, you will see relatively complex mathematics. And finally, I would like to talk about another notion or another project that was inspired by my collaboration with Rachel from the Ethnomathematics Nation. It is about stone fish traps. And the idea of the stone fish traps was really that to trap fish, to use tides to trap fish. And this photo that shared with me by Georgia Combs, a photographer from British Columbia. For mathematical eye, you will see patterns and circles and shapes. So there is no doubt that there was some mathematical thinking there. And I want to show you a little clip that Ethnomathematics Nation actually made for this particular project. Just
The fish traps in our territory span the entire coastline and can still be seen to this day. The age of the traps is unknown. It's obvious Tla'amin, Klahus, Comox, and Hamalko people had sophisticated knowledge and a high level of social organization in order to engineer and build these structures on such a large scale. This would point to a time when they would have sustained a large population, which would place them before the pandemics decimated the indigenous populations along the coast. Even though the construction of these traps remains somewhat of an enigma to us today, there is still knowledge as to how they were used, as you just heard in our stories. We don't know why our ancestors used the various geometric designs we see in the fish traps today. The different shapes would have served different purposes, and the traps would have been used to target different species of fish, crustaceans, clams, and other marine life. Our food sources have changed over time, and we have had to adapt to challenges such as restricted access to our territory and resources and other impacts like overfishing, loss of habitat, and pollution. These fish traps are an important part of our heritage, a legacy left to us by our ancestors that we all need to protect and preserve.
So what is ethnomathematics? What is mathematics in this? And if we combine that with two-eyed seeing, what are we going to get? So there is no doubt that building these stone traps was an engineering project. And as any engineering project, it required quite a bit of mathematical thinking. For example, location of the trap, the type of the trap, the shape, the size, configuration, topology, the behavior of tides, behavior of fish. So the maker or the makers, they had to have all this knowledge before they started building the trap, but also optimization of the available resources, the manpower, material. I read some articles claiming that those stones used to build these traps were quite big and that they were brought from far away. So it was an engineering project that happened hundreds of years ago. Also, there is this view that these traps were busy throughout the year. So the maker had to put them in a way to catch seasonal fish. Optimization of the outcome. Securing a reliable source of food for a long period of time. So this inspired a joint project that involved Simon Fraser University, the Haida Nation, the Pacific Institute for Mathematical Sciences, and Callisto program as a joint project of PIMS and Sibera. And the idea was really to create a couple of Jupyter notebooks that would be a learning resource and that would model traditional climbing stonefish traps. And I want to show you a clip from a presentation that we gave earlier this year. And this particular clip, you will hear the voice of Laura Gutierrez Funderbruch, my former student and collaborator. So let me see how this will work.
Hand and through discussion, what are the parameters involved, then we can go ahead and play with some code and simulate the traps. So for instance, one of the parameters that was discussed was the radius of the trap and the height of the trap. So for instance, let's just take a look at what happens, for instance, in this case. So in this case, if I press the plot 3D beach, I see that if I pick a 25-meter trap, a trap with radius 25 meters and height 2 meters. So this is what the trap would look like. And if I remove that tick, so in here, I see the same plot as before. So the red line again represents how much the trap is being covered by water. And then this plot right here represents how much fish is being harvested and how much fish is surviving. So with these parameters, about 44% of fish were harvested and 55% of fish survived. So the way the simulation works is we assume that there's 1,000 fish and it's a little fixed. So the same parameters will always yield the same results, which is not necessarily like real life, where every day we get different number of fish. But if we were to isolate this and experiment with this, we can use these parameters. So if I ask the question, okay, so how about if I decrease the radius of my trap? So in this case, I see that a trap that's not as wide doesn't really get covered in water. And so we don't really capture any fish. So I can go ahead and play with my parameters. Okay, so this is a trap that doesn't have as much height. And I can go ahead and see how well the trap does. So in this case, the trap doesn't harvest any fish. And so this can facilitate a discussion of really the amount of complexity involved in these traps. Hundreds of years ago or thousands of years ago, our ancestors didn't really have a chance to visualize this in play. So they really had to try. It was trial and error, and really dozens of years of trying and seeing what worked that led to these structures. Whereas with the code here, we can go ahead and visualize, okay, so what are some of the parameters that help us have a fish trap that harvests fish?
And guess what? Those traps still work. This is a photo that Rochelle shared with me, and the whole community was excited that they had to rescue 17 dolphins that were chased by whales and got stuck in these ancient fish traps. And I would like to finish with this quote by a piece of this from a poem of Haida storyteller Sky. So it goes, now when the raven had flown a while longer, the sky in one direction brightened. It enabled him to see, they say. And then he flew right up against it. He pushed his mind through and pulled his body after. The reason that I wish to share this piece of Haida storytelling with you is that in my view, this explains exactly how discovery in mathematics works. We are stuck with a problem, and then at one point, sky in one direction brightened. Oh, you see the opening. And you go right up against it, and you put your mind first through it. We'll see how long it will take that you make your proof in detail so that you can put also your body through. So thank you. And I think we have a few minutes for your comments and questions.
Thank you very much, Veso, for this very, very interesting and inspiring talk. Actually, before we get into the questions, I'll pass this to my colleague, Rob Corliss, who wants to make a short logistical announcement.
Thank you, Jürgen. I'm trying to send this message in the chat, and I've lost my send button on this thing because it's gone away. Anyway, I'll read it to you and I'll try and send it later. Please note that the conference site makes extensive use of pop-ups. And while the system looks for blockers when you first log in, we've had reports that it is not detecting all of them. If you have a pop-up blocker, you are very likely to have problems throughout the site. So make sure you turn off your blocker while using the conference site. A quick test to see if you have a blocker running is to go into the lounge. If you do not see the enter networking room button, you have a blocker. And so Rochelle has sent that now to you. So if you do not see the enter networking room button, then you have a blocker and you have to figure out how to turn it off. All right, end of messages. Thank you, Jürgen.
Thank you, Rob. So there are a few questions. Please, if you have any questions, you're not able to ask them yourself, but please enter them in the Q&A session. You get to the Q&A session, there's a Q&A button, either at the bottom or the top of your Zoom window. And if it's not there, then try clicking on the More button, the 3 dots that you see. So I'll read out the first question. What is the nature of the forest of ethnomathematics itself? Although the imagery and words convey the idea of a collection of trees, to what degree are they perhaps in some cases thought of as branches of or aspects of the same tree? That means what commonalities exist between some trees that make them a rose by another name?
So that's a good question. I mean, and a fair question. So we try to answer that question by looking what is underground, actually. And we connected them underground. They hold their hands, you know. And as in any forest, I mean, they're sharing the same environment, and of course they are branching in. But the message that we are trying to send through this image is really that they're with the same root. They're branching really out of the same root, and that root is our real world. That mathematics is the way how humans over centuries and across the globe deal with reality, explain reality, understand reality, try to predict reality and change it. So I'm not sure if I completely answered your question, but that was our thinking, really, that we connected this forest by following this idea about trees holding their hands, that all those roots are leading to the same source. As Jonathan Borwin said, that mathematics is a human activity.
Thank you. I'll read the next question. Very nice talk, Professor. Can you tell in which software you have made your presentation?
Oh, this is just a PowerPoint. This was just a PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
But I'd like to point out that there were a few examples that he made with Maple.
That's right. That's right. And I think I like that. I don't know about my audience, but I really kind of enjoyed. And Peter was great, really. I mean, he created these animations, you know, and that Maple here. I was talking about two-eyed seeing, and Maple here is this really that other eye, and help. I think it helps really to communicate this idea about reflection symmetries, for example. Makes it obvious, you know. And don't forget, we are dealing only with the photo of this hat, so we are really restricted. But still, the fact that we can put that line of symmetry there, and that we can demonstrate that maker from 120 years ago was able to do this perfect symmetry on the object. It's really something. And I also like Peter's take on this 3D shape of the hat.
Thank you. The next question, did the simulations of fish traps find that they could have been optimized further?
So our goal was really to make a learning resource. And I should say also that we did a couple of projects with PIMS and Callisto, but with the full involvement of the Ethnomathematics Nation. No. So if, and I think that is the only way really to go when we are talking about traditional knowledge and ethnomathematics. If we want to do something, if we want to model something, we have to get these First Nations involved in this. This is their intellectual property. No. And did we try to optimize this further? You know, that was not our goal. It is, you know, and we rather wanted to honor the knowledge of makers from God knows when. That what they did was optimization in their way, and they were sustainable. You know, those fish traps, they've been neglected, and particularly in this territory where the Ethnomathematics Nation lives now, they've been neglected for tens of, I don't know how many years, but they still work. can we be sure that what we are making today will be around in 200-300 years and working the same way and meeting their purposes? So, in short, our idea was rather to honor these ancient makers than to challenge if they did this completely optimal.
Thank you. I'll read the next question. Would you consider Soviet or Russian math Olympiad questions or Hungarian Erdős type problems as ethnomathematics?
Yes,
Is it good for mathematics in general to consider some of its parts as ethnomathematics?
I think that ethnomathematics is just a part of life, of reality. I think that we should accept the fact that mathematics and mathematicians are divided in different cultural groups. The Maple community is a cultural group itself.
Thank you. Next question, who came up with the implicit equation of the Haida hat?
That is Peters. That is Peters. So I did this in a different program, but for this purpose, I really, and my animation was not as good as Peters. So I challenged him to do this in Maple, and he did, I think, a great job.
Thank you. So here's a bit of a controversial question. I really do not see what exactly is your point. Stone throwing of playing children is another example of complex mathematical thinking too.
Yeah.
Trajectory optimization, including initial velocity direction and velocity, wind influence, and so on.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is the question?
I just read what it is.
I think that those two just confirm actually what I was trying to talk about, and what D'Ambrosio and Borba and Bishop actually claim, that when we talk about mathematics, mathematics is not what we put on the board. We can see mathematics in children's play, and actually, if I may advertise my Math Culture Outreach program, we actually made a film, an animated film, in which children exactly do stone throwing, and to illustrate a pattern there, and to show that there is mathematics in this. So I don't see this as a controversial question, quite opposite.
Thank you. There's a request whether it's possible to obtain your worksheet, your modeling worksheet.
Yes, it is. If you contact me, I'll put you in contact with people from Callisto who are managing this project for us. Or you are talking about the Maple. Is that a Maple or Jupyter? I'm not sure what the question was referring to.
Maple worksheet, the mathematical modeling Maple worksheet.
Yeah, Peter is the owner of this worksheet. So I'm quite sure that he's willing to share.
So you can, I guess you can contact the organizers, and we will get you in contact with the author.
Yeah.
Next question, what would the ethno group who designed and own the fish traps regard as optimized? For example, maximum catch or avoiding overfishing?
That's a great question, actually. I think that they aimed to optimize to have enough, to have exactly enough. So they didn't want to overfish, that's for sure. And they need to survive. That was the main point of everything. So how do you hit that fine line? That's the optimization, in my view. Maybe they didn't think about that in this way, but that is maybe another example of two-eyed seeing.
Thank you. Next question. Teaching mathematics to students who are forced to take it can be a challenge. Addition of computers gives us a powerful tool to reach a certain group. But what can we learn from cultural practices, for example, weaving to assist teaching?
Mm-hmm. So the weaving is if you wish, it is really an algorithm. You know, to produce what Betty what Achille was demonstrating there is really following a certain algorithm or creating a certain algorithm. Bishop mentioned that playing is also one of these fundamental categories of mathematics. You know, so and as part of my math culture outreach program, I always try, when I meet with students in my workshops, I always try to have hands-on activity. And making mathematics closer to students by asking them to make it helps. Computers, they help also, but creating, I'll show you, the most precious part of a piece of my property. This is a Mobius strip created by weaving in traditional way by a member of the Tlami Nation, and that was given to me as a gift. No.
Very nice.
No. So in that way, if we challenge our students really to try to do some hands-on activity, maybe we are going to get mathematics closer to them. And that is a challenge. I mean, if you teach mathematics, how do you convince your students? How do you convince your average student that mathematics really matters? There's a resistance to this fact. And I really think that if we use some samples from indigenous traditional cultures, maybe we can get that mathematics closer to our students today.
Okay, there's one last question. We're already a bit over time, and then I will unfortunately have to close this discussion, as interesting as it is. I like the two eyes examples, arts/symmetry, using arts from British Columbia. Where do I start if I want to find examples from indigenous art from the Haldimand Tract?
From the
Haldimand Tract.
I can share only my own experience working with indigenous people. You need to establish a relationship with indigenous groups that are on your territory, or that you are on their territory, if you wish. And that could be a challenge. That could be challenging, because establishing that relationship means also establishing the level of trust that these groups are ready to engage with you, to share with you their knowledge and things. So that would be my starting point. But also, at least in Canada, each university has something like Aboriginal Office for Aboriginal Peoples, or some indigenous initiative. And I think that is maybe the simplest way for academics to get involved in this. Look for your local community in a way, your indigenous colleagues at your institutions. Look for the groups that live in your region, and go from there. And good luck. You know, that's not an easy task, making a meaningful relationship with indigenous scholars, or with the indigenous elders, or just the members of indigenous community, because we need really to overcome hundreds of years of not easy history.
Okay, thank you very much again, Beso, for the very interesting talk and for this lively discussion. And we'll close this part of the session now, and then we have a 10-minute, 9-minute break, and then we'll start with the regular session program. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Vesal. Bye for now.